if it's a standard factory caliber, SAMI caliber or CIP caliber, we probably have multiples. In most cases, we have large numbers of multiples. If it's an esoteric cartridge, like a black powder cartridge or something like that, then we may only have one or two. But the goal is to have enough so that the back orders are minimized. And one of the ways that I expand the inventory is we watch back orders, and anytime something starts to move in that direction, we buy more tools.
Which is great, because there's two parts of the whole reamer rental thing to me. One is, yes, you're going to save money, and if it's a one-off job, definitely look at that. But also, if you look at buying reamers, the wait time can be completely insane. So you're solving really two problems.
Right.
As I see it.
Yeah, and actually that's, one of the ways that I advertise the business now is save time. I don't worry so much about the money part of it because time is a bigger issue at this point.
It really is.
And, my suppliers, I don't get tools any faster than Joe down the street does. And so to wait 12 weeks or more for a reamer is not unusual.
Yep.
And that's a little hard sometimes for people who aren't in the gun trade as a business. They're doing it for a hobby, or maybe they're just getting started. They haven't learned yet that the gun business has traditionally always had long waits. And now it's even worse because there's so much more demand.
Yeah.
And the suppliers, I think, are trying to maximize their production as much as they can. But they have to guess, too, which cartridges do I need to build tools for to keep the pipeline full.
Yep.
And they don't always guess right, so that's why we have long delivery times.
Yeah.
I send stuff in for resharpening. I don't do resharpening in-house. The only thing we do is clean off metal buildup or chip welding, where it's welded on the shoulder. And really, a lot of times you can pop that off with a penny. I think we've talked about that.
What is it, the older than 1982 or something like that?
Yeah, it needs to be a copper penny,
Yeah.
not the new zinc coated with copper type thing. And you just take that penny. A lot of times I'll grab it in a pair of pliers so that I can get a good grip on it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And then also maybe put the shank of the reamer in a vise or something so that you can actually push. And of course you don't want to cut yourself, but basically you can use that copper to push the little chip off. And what's nice about that is the copper is a little bit, when it comes to cutting in a chamber, it's lubrous. So it helps with chip flow and minimizes that welding in the future.
Gotcha. Leaves a little deposit right there on the leading edge.
And sometimes you can see it, when you're scraping that stuff off. You're not really working directly on the cutting edge. You're inside the flute and pushing that stuff off. And you can sometimes see a little copper left behind, and that's not a bad thing. It's actually good for the reamer, especially if you're doing stainless steel. Stainless and copper work real well together.
Yeah, I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, actually, when you manufacture barrels, you use copper sulfate before you push the button through or pull the button through, and that provides a fair amount of lubricity for that button to ride on.
Yeah.
So it works out well.
Cool. So what else do we have here?
We have, this is a device for lapping your bolt lugs. So you remove the barrel, thread this into the receiver, and then this is a spring-loaded plunger, which has got a pretty good force on it.
Yeah.
And the idea is this just rides on the bolt face and provides mechanical push against the bolt.
So that you don't have to pull back like you normally do.
Well, and that's just it. I've seen a lot of guys doing YouTube videos where they're holding that bolt back and trying to work it. This makes it a lot easier. You're just working the bolt up and down. It doesn't put any undue wear on the muzzle or on the breech face. And you just want to keep it clean. You don't want to put any of the lapping compound on that face. You're just putting it on the lugs.
Who makes this particular tool?
That particular one is a PTG. They make a few different ones. And what I started doing is I make some of them in my own shop because I want models that maybe aren't available or I couldn't get.
Yeah, there's different tenon diameters and threadings and all that.
Right. So I have several that I made. And they're exactly the same type of tool. A lot of mine are made from pieces of barrel shank.
Sure.
Over the years, I've done so many barrels I can't count. But
yeah.
So that's a really simple tool. You asked about kind of the funny stories that come from those.
Yeah.
I've seen those come back where it was obvious that the person using it didn't know how it was supposed to work.
Yeah.
And they had lapped the face a whole bunch. And I've seen them where I'm not sure what they had them screwed against, but there's a ring left on the face of the lapping deal. So people are creative. If they don't really understand the mechanics of a tool, they'll do things with it that really it was never intended for. So, and then we have a reamer holder here. This happens to be a Dave Manson
floater.
Yep. And So the advantage to this one is it's very simple. There's no ball bearings or hydraulics or anything, so it holds up really well to the rental process. It provides just a little bit of axial movement, more than enough for, most guys have a lathe that they think is pretty accurate and they've dialed in their tailstock pretty nice. What they may not realize, and Gordy teaches this, that the tailstock can move up and down when you lock it down in place.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's nice about a floating reamer holder is that it takes up anything you missed in your setup.
Sure.
And there's two approaches, of course. You can try and control every aspect when you're doing your chambering, or you can allow certain tools to fix problems maybe you're not aware of.
Just like with reloading, right?
Sure.
Floating dies and floating shell holders and all that kind of stuff.
And that's always been my approach personally, is I try to use tools that will fix problems that I don't want to take the time to fix. To me it's very cost effective.
Yeah, let's talk about this guy.
Yeah, so these are annular cutters, and an annular cutter in the machine world is for mag drills, where you clamp a mag drill down on a piece of plate or on a block or something, and you cut a precise hole at a precise location.
I would love to have one of those.
Right, they're very cool. So that's what these are. They're actually from that system. They have a hole that goes all the way through them for a pilot. And what happened here is, and I didn't invent this, this is something somebody else thought about and did. They figured out which of these have the correct diameters so that you can do muzzle threading. And so that what you do is, instead of having a lathe, you use this to reduce the diameter of your muzzle. The inside has a fixed size, and you just cut whatever excess material you have off using the face of the cutter.
Yep. So it cuts the shoulder and it cuts the diameter down.
Exactly.
With the different cutting flutes there.
Right. And so basically when you push the pilot through, you have a little stub comes out the back, and that's, most guys use this to drive it. They're gonna use a cordless drill, variable speed drill. It's real important to keep the RPMs low on these. It's funny, when I first got them, people were burning them up pretty frequently. So I sat down and I wrote a whole new set of instructions. And one of the things I did was I stuck warning, warning, warning across the page. And basically that warning just tells them to slow down, use oil, and keep it under 250 RPMs. Since I wrote that, I've had almost none of them come back damaged. So.
No bright blue heat discoloration?
If they don't use oil, that happens.
Oh, boy.
And I sometimes get pilots back that I'm very concerned that the customer maybe needs to check their bore.
Sure.
Because there's enough damage to this pilot that I'm like, you got a chip stuck, you did something.
Yeah.
And that brings up an interesting point. People sometimes don't understand that pilots are supposed to be slip fit. They should never bind. They should never be hard to put in or take out.
Right.
And we see a lot of damage to pilots that it was clear that the person didn't look at that aspect.
Sure.
Well, I managed to get it in the muzzle, so now I'll just jam it home.
Yeah, and what I do is I put it on a range rod or something like that, and I'll insert it in, and then I'll go a ways in, because sometimes things get a little tighter the further you get in there, depending on how it's lapped or if it's lapped, and you want a tight enough fit that there's not excess slop, but you don't want it to be so tight that it's in there dragging and scratching and all the rest.
Right.
Yeah.
And on the pilot subject, I brought this to show you. This is a pilot from a standard reamer that somebody forced, and they managed to cut part of the pilot away using that 90-degree shoulder where the pilot matches up, and pushed it right over the forcing cone.
Woof.
And then they also managed to jam the screw in the front so that it's almost welded in place.
Wow.
And the way I found this, of course, is when I go to clean the reamers and take the chip weld off or whatever, I touched it when I was going to take it off, and I could feel the large spots and the burrs on it. So that's probably something in B-roll we'll want to show them up close.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit painful, but that's reality.
Right. But luckily, that's fairly small percentage of the stuff I get back from people. Most people are super respectful of the rental tools, realizing that if they want to rent again in the future, if they return stuff in good condition and clean, that keeps the costs down, and I'm going to be there to help them in the future.
Yeah.
So these instances are rare, and we watch for them. You'll see inspection stickers on our shipping tubes and stuff. That's legit. We have a lit magnifying system, and it's not really powerful. It's like 2 power.
Okay.
But that's enough to see things that would make the reamer or whatever cutter unserviceable. If it's something that can be fixed in-house, we fix it. But most anything that's really damaged goes to Pacific Tool and Gauge to be recut. And the reason I do that is it's reliable. I know what I'm going to get back from them. I know what the time frame is going to be. Costs are set.
Yep.
You know, so that and
they know their tooling. They know what all the relief angles need to be and
right.
all that stuff, right?
And we're down to the point where, you know, after like 16 years of running a rental business, I have very set, simple policies that are easy for the customer to follow. If people don't follow them, it's simply because I'm just like everybody else. When I'm on a website and I have to click a box to finish the order, I don't read any of that stuff. And I know they don't read it on my site. But it's the reality, you know. I like to be very responsible. You know, used to be the people in the gun industry were all personal responsibility oriented. They didn't want to do anything that would hinder business for anybody else. They wanted to pay their own bills, pay their own way.
Yep.
In the last 15 years or so, with the major expansion of the gun business, we've brought in a lot of people from outside the industry that don't have that ethic. And
I've heard stories.
I'm seeing it in the rental business. There are more people who are both lacking in knowledge of how to use the tool and don't have personal responsibility. And that adds a huge expense to the business. But I've still managed to keep that to a level by adding training and adding books. And one of the things I do is and we'll give you a link for this. I have a copy of the primer, which teaches how tools work and why they're designed the way they are. Doesn't really teach gunsmithing per se. It just teaches a lot about how the tools are supposed to function.
Yeah, I read that copy that you gave me. Great.
Right.
It's a quick read, too. You could read this in an hour.
But I'm going to give you a link where they can get it for free.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Another reason to click on that first link in the video description.
Right. So the other tools that are here, we've got in use with the muzzle, the annular cutter. I brought a die, so we'll be able to thread the muzzle. Brought a suppressor for the gun we're going to be building. And so we'll use those tools just to show that that stuff can be done without a lathe and can be done precisely.
Yep.
The other thing I brought was a crowning tool. This is also a tool, but Brownells sells these. And so it's just like their standard set. It has a pilot that goes on the various tools so you can align it and keep it straight to your gun. There's an 11-degree target cutter. There's a 90-degree facer if you needed to cut the barrel off and face it back.
Yep.
There's a 45-degree cutter. People use these for a lot of different purposes. One of the purposes is if you do the 11-degree crown, you can take this and use it sort of as a deburring tool. You make a very light cut and just basically take the crowns off the rifling right at the muzzle and just remove any little burr there might be at the bottom of the groove.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys use them for that specific purpose, but I've seen them used for beveling the back of a cylinder so that you can load faster, you know, that kind of thing. So those are some of the tools we brought along so that we could really wanted to show that there's a lot of things you can do without specialty lathe or a mill or whatever.